What's up guys, it's Lord Botha here with another video. In today's video we actually have a gaming review for you. That's right, I finally got around to playing Star Wars Jedi Survivor, so let's take a look at both the pros and the cons of the game. First off, while reviewing this game, I will say that I did play Jedi Fallen Order and I did enjoy it a lot. However, there were some elements of the game I wasn't very happy about and certain things that I thought could be improved on. And I gotta say, in some ways they did improve on those things in this game. Now, when this game originally released on consoles was riddled with bugs and frame rate drops and different errors that had to be fixed with patches later on. However, over a year since the game's release, I have to say that while playing it on Xbox myself, it ran pretty smooth and I didn't really see any problems with the actual functionality of the game. To that end, let's dive straight into the elements of the game. First off, the animation I found to be quite crisp and clear, and the character models to actually be fairly pleasing to the eye without reaching that sort of uncanny valley level of realism. And I do have to say the character acting of this game is actually done quite well. The voice acting performances alone, aside from the animation, actually emote a lot better and a lot more emotion than, say, things like The Acolyte, which is live action television. Now, the combat flow of the game is the same style as the previous game. That sort of God of War-like, several enemies that are fairly beefed up, or one large enemy, etc., etc. The difficulty in fighting these enemies is based solely on the difficulty level that you choose at the beginning of the game. If you decide to play on the easiest mode possible, you can essentially button mash your way to victory. If you decide to play on the hardest level possible, you better know how to dodge and parry effectively if you want to be successful in combat. Now, the sort of Prince of Persia scaling system is back in this game, with wall running and zip lining and all of that in it, and you get to experience certain grandiose scale and sights as you make your way up gigantic spaces and scenes. I did enjoy this feature, although I have to say some of the elements were slightly more difficult than I expected, simply because wall scaling in this game at sometimes feels like a puzzle. But there were very few times where I felt like I was lost or didn't know where I was going. One element this game also gets right is its open worldness. The one way I could describe the open worldness of this game is that it is open world but still focused. There are definite paths to your main objectives, and really if you want to explore further other paths that lead to other prizes and rewards, you simply have to just veer off from the main path towards a different one. Areas of the game aren't fully accessible from all different directions, which I kind of like that focus of the game. I remember playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Valhalla and being overwhelmed at the amount of stuff on the map and ways to access things on the map. This game does a better job of leading you down a path that actually seems like it's going somewhere and not filled with a ton of objectives. Also, peacefully, there's not a ton of collectibles littered everywhere that you have to collect to achieve missions in this game. Most of the collectibles lying around in this map are actually currency that you can spend at the shops. So there's actually a purpose to these collectibles rather than just some kind of cosmetic or power-up that's special that you get at the end of collecting all of them. I also enjoyed the customization of this game. The introduced RPG elements of being able to customize Cal, his look in terms of his beard and hair, the clothes that he wears, customizing his lightsaber, which is a holdover from the first game, and also customizing his blaster, which is an optional weapon that you get later on in the game, were all fun elements brought to this game in terms of customizability and really playing the way you want to play and be perceived in the game. I've always been a big pro-choice gamer when it comes to choosing your look and your style, and more elements that add freedom of choice to a game is something that I'm always going to be big in promoting. And I'm glad that they contained it in this game. And it's up to you how you want Cal to look. If you want him to look like a serious, experienced Jedi warrior, you can in an armor suit. If you want to make him look like a silly, swashbuckling space pirate with a mullet and a mustache, you can do that too. The real selling point here is the main story of the game, however. The story is compelling and driven, far more so than any other story that's being produced by Lucasfilm and Disney right now. I found myself actually guessing about the fates of characters and actually caring about the fates of these characters and how the story will ultimately be resolved. They also do a good job of referencing the rebellion efforts against the Empire while having a story that's completely whole and separate from it. The philosophies and beliefs in the story are also presented very well and very clear. There's a lot less confusion than we experience in modern Disney Star Wars contained within this game. They also do a good job of referencing the High Republic and that era without getting too bogged down in all of it. We're left with some mystery of how full-fledged the High Republic was, their hierarchy, and what was actually done during that time period, which I think that mystery is needed to really sell the locality of this story as it moves on. One of the most compelling stories in this game also features one of the new characters, Bode. Bode is a driven man that's willing to do anything to protect his daughter. As a father, I can relate to this kind of narrative. It also does well relating back to the prequel trilogy and Anakin's storyline through Bode, reiterating the point that going too far to protect the ones that we love out of fear can sometimes actually result in their harm. All in all, the animation, story, flow, and open world of this game fits very well to make a neat and concise game that was enjoyable to play. The pacing was on point too. The game didn't feel extremely too long or too short, which tends to be a problem in modern gaming. And I found the game compelling enough to actually continue to go back to and actually finish, which I have to say during this time period in my life especially is quite a feat in itself. But these have been some of the more positive aspects of the game and why I liked it. Now moving on to some of the negatives of the game. Now here are some of the problems with Star Wars Jedi Survivor. The first has to do with the open world element that I actually enjoy a lot. A lot of the open world areas of the games on planets are restricted and you can't access them later in the game until you get specific powers that allow you to be able to access them. Which means you can get so far into an area then you're blocked out, and so you have to wait and get further through the story, then you have to come back to that area and go through it again. I feel like it was an unnecessary grind factor that was put into the game specifically to make the explorable areas take longer to explore, essentially artificially lengthening the game. Also, certain side missions had repetitive rewards that kind of made them feel lackluster and not really worth doing. There are several High Republic Jedi ruins that you have to explore as a side mission, and it's essentially a series of movement puzzles with leaps and wall runs and all that. But the reward for each of them is almost the same exact thing, and depending how you're playing, it kind of feels a little empty. And this is a bit of a spoiler, but essentially all the rewards for those temple exploration missions are essentially power-ups that help you level up. Which brings us to another problem, the power leveling trees. The sort of branching off level up system with powers and different accessed abilities don't really seem like they make any real impact in the game. Now, I wasn't playing the game on its hardest mode possible, so maybe they play more of a factor in there, but it didn't seem accessing any of the game's special abilities really seemed to have a really big factor on the combat. Now, certain abilities were helpful. There are situations where you have a lot of cannon fodder enemies around you, and being able to use the force pull that pulls all of the enemies to you at once and shred through them like butter is very helpful, so you don't have to chase them down all one by one. But for the most part, especially the lightsaber abilities, if you pick a lightsaber stance, which you get two to have to use, that you can switch back and forth with immediately in the game, you can essentially max out and be pretty dominant in those forms. And essentially the lightsaber styles you choose, whether it's the new and I still argue dumb looking crossguard form, or the double-bladed lightsaber form, which I personally like because of its quick ability, you can use the different lightsaber forms in their basic attacks and heavy attacks to do essentially the majority of the fighting for you. Finding out what style of lightsaber form for you is way more important than actually maxing out its abilities. There are more customization problems I find with this game, as it seems to be trying to be a half-styled RPG. Unlike the previous game, there is no customization of the Mantis. You cannot change the Mantis's look in terms of paint or anything like that, like you were able to do during Fallen Order. Which is a little sad because I thought that they were actually going to expand the customization of the Mantis, not actually retract it. In Fallen Order, you could change sort of the paint stylings of the Mantis and how it looked. In this game, I thought you were going to be able to go beyond that, not just changing the paint, but also changing the actual form of the Mantis and the parts of the ship. I even thought we might be able to get some slight space combat. But unfortunately, those things did not come to fruition. We are also given a town as sort of our home base of operations in this game, not just the Mantis. And the way they presented it at the start of the game was it felt like you were going to be able to customize the town and actually change it and mold it into what you want it to look like, with access to abilities and other things, depending on what businesses are able to operate and open in the game. Essentially, I thought you were going to be a little bit of a Jedi mayor, or at least be similar to the keep upgrades that you saw in games like Dragon Age Inquisition. Unfortunately, this was not an actual possibility, and the only thing that's really upgradable within this town seems to be the rooftop garden of the saloon that Grease, the pilot, owns and that you have control of. Also, one of the sort of collectible missions for this game that is littered all over the planet is the ability to cut down certain trees and plants that gives you seeds that you can plant in this garden. There is a character that you can recruit that will give you codex knowledge, essentially experience, every time that you bring these seeds to them. But other than that, planting them in the rooftop garden is purely for aesthetic purpose. They don't give you any power-ups or anything like that. It's just for looks. There are several side characters in this game that are recruitable within the different worlds that you visit. They come back to the saloon and essentially they give you side missions to go do. One of them is a bounty hunter, which you have to collect bounties on. And you get rewards that essentially you can use to buy certain aesthetic customizations within shops, as well as some power-ups. I didn't find the power-ups, again, to be that useful or change the experience of the actual fighting or gameplay, so I didn't really mess around with them a lot. Now, if you talk to some of these side characters, I have to warn you, unless you're ready for a long droll through this person's life and lore dump, I don't recommend you talk to them just randomly, because you are going to get those conversations. And if you're bored really easily listening to a random Star Wars character's exposition, their life story, I don't recommend you talk to them and you just take on the quests in the world when you find them. Moving on to my final big gripe about this game, and this is a sort of major spoiler, so if you don't want this major spoiler, I'd skip ahead in the video or stop here. The main negative I have here about the story is that the twist in this story is the most obvious twist you see coming at the start of the game. In the first mission of the game, it is essentially a heist in which all the characters working with Cal are eliminated, except for Bode. Bode is the only one of Cal's crew that survives, and they make it painfully obvious that this guy is an agent of the Empire. They do so by making him disappear at conspicuous times and then reappearing out of nowhere. They also have him have conspicuous amount of knowledge at the right times about the Empire and things like that. And I remember myself saying at the beginning of this game, like less than an hour in this game, seeing this guy and listening to him speak and what was going on and being like, yeah, this guy's a narc. This guy is an agent of the Empire. He is not actually going to be a good guy in this game. They're going to turn him. And what a surprise, I was right. I could also tell that he was going to be an agent of the Empire because he obsessively talks about protecting his daughter and keeping his daughter safe, which made it clear that obviously she was being threatened by the Empire, or he was working with the Empire to try to keep her safe, because the easiest way to keep her safe from the Empire is to work for them. It was an obvious twist, and I didn't really like it. They could have done more to try to hide it. They could have been more subtle. But what I wasn't suspecting was they once again subvert Order 66 in this game. It is revealed to us when Bode finally turns heel and betrays all his friends that not only is Bode a bounty hunter working for the Empire as an agent, but he is in actuality a Force user and former Jedi Padawan. Just like Cal, he was a kid that escaped Order 66, and he hid for a while afraid. Then he found the love of a woman, they had a kid, and his wife was killed. He's now obsessed with keeping his daughter, the one person that still loves him in this world, alive. And by doing so, it's turned him to the dark side. And he becomes sort of the main villain of the last quarter of the game. Again, this is subverting Order 66 by having yet another Jedi surviving this execution order. I don't know how many Jedi we're up to now that survived Order 66, but it seems like damn near all of them. Also, we're left with a lot of unanswered questions about Bode. Who was his master? Where did he come from? What was his life like? He mentions hardships. What were those hardships? He's a compelling character with a lot of mystery to them, and they don't seem to answer any of these questions. I thought they were going to give us at least some answers, more answers to his background, but apparently they are keeping it a mystery. Maybe we will learn more in the third installment of this game franchise. That is because his daughter does survive, and it's most likely that she will be able to use the Force, and she will probably be Cal's Padawan. There are some continuity errors too that raise questions about the nature of this game, like the existence of the hidden world of Tanalorr. How come the Republic later on never talks about Tanalorr, never tries to explore Tanalorr? How is it that Luke and Leia never learn of Tanalorr's existence or try to explore there? What is the importance and mystery of Tanalorr? Why did the Jedi Council not want to have a temple and colony on Tanalorr anymore? All these are questions that are not really deeply answered throughout the game. And leaving your player with more questions than answers at the end of a game is not really something you want to do. But again, maybe they will explain this in further installments. It is yet to be seen. I do expect a third installment to come out soon, and I am afraid what they might do with the plot of this game. In this game, Cal embraces two things, his love for Merrin, and several times he embraces the dark side. There was also a gameplay element when you're fighting Bode where you have to embrace the dark side to actually beat him. I tried not actually embracing the dark side and letting it go, if anything, just to find out what happens. And when I found out what happens is, you just die. You are then prompted to respawn, and you respawn just outside the fighting area of the map. Then you run to it and you just start the fight over again, without even a cutscene or anything like that. Which I guess if you're playing on a very difficult mode is probably frustrating, but I found on normal mode it was fairly easy to just jump right back into it. But embracing his love for Merrin, and of course the fear of losing her that will come with it, as well as his ability to now embrace the dark side, I'm afraid that they might be moving Cal into a position where he becomes more of a dark Jedi or Sith. Eventually in the third installment, I would not be surprised to see Cal go dark and his Padawan, a girl, subvert him and actually take him down. He may be redeemed in the third installment and then save the day at the end, but it will be a woman, his female Padawan, and Bode's daughter, that will have to be the one to actually bring him back to the light. That said, the game was pretty concise and callous when it came to just snuffing out Bode, so they might just snuff out Cal the same way. Not that I'm completely opposed to that, I actually kind of like a return to the black and white morality of old Star Wars that this game presents. In all, despite the shortcomings of the game, I found the positives to outweigh the negatives. And I really did enjoy playing this. I probably won't go back to playing it again because it is such a narrative, story-driven game, and the extras aren't enough really to draw me back to want to go through a second playthrough to be a completionist. The choices also aren't in-depth enough to actually have real impact on the story either way to present second or third outcomes. So I wouldn't say that this game has any more replayability factor than the first installment. All in all, I give this game about an 81 out of 100. Now I'm a former teacher, so we're going to do our ratings out of 100. So an 81 out of 100, that's about a B minus. And that's what this game kind of is. It's a B minus. It's a good game that's fun to play, but I wouldn't pay the huge price tag it had when it came out, especially with what a buggy mess it was. I would have done what I did, which is wait till it came out free on Game Pass. And as a free-to-play game on Game Pass, it's actually quite good, and I think it's worth your time to play. It's definitely better than any Star Wars product that Disney is putting out on television or in the theaters these days. But those are just my thoughts and rating on this game. If you have your own thoughts and rating, feel free to leave them in the comments. If you like this video, I do wish that you like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like this video, I thank you for watching this long, and we'll see you again later.